Okay, so now that we have finished the Conduct Procurements process here in the 6th edition of the PMBOK in PM City from the crowd trading, let's go through and review, starting with the inputs, as always. Well, we gotta start with plans, right? Because how are we supposed to know what we need to conduct and do and execute in terms of procurement if we don't have our project management plan? And I draw it as a file folder because, as you know, I like to think of it as a bunch of plans, not just the procurement plan, which obviously is part or probably the most major one we're going to be using as an input to conduct procurements, but there's also other plans, for instance, quality plans and research plans, and resource plans, and many other plans that are going to be useful in determining how we best conduct our procurement. Also, there's lots of different project documents that we are going to be using, and those could be lessons learned. They could be our risk management plan, or risk plans, or registers, even the schedule, right? When do we need to procure things, and when do we expect them, and etc. Also, we have our procurement documents. So our, say for instance, our request for quotes or request for bids, the things that we are sending out. Then these also are the procurement docs. I'll write it all out for you. And these are procurement docs. And then, of course, well, what do we get back? Well, those kind of requirements or explanations and what they're bidding is their seller proposals. All right, what are they selling and describing back to us, so that way, obviously, we can go about conducting our procurement. And as always, we are a product of our environment. So based on the business and the place that we work is our enterprise environmental factors. For instance, are we allowed to use a third party, or must we go through a procurement department, or what is the way we do things around here in terms of the culture and how we work with our vendors and their deals. So and this might be their RFQ bid, like kind of what, or their quote, or whatever they come back with. All right. And then also too, you might have templates and guidelines and other things at your disposal. So this is your organizational process assets, are also inputs. Okay. Again, this is just review, so I've went into everything in more detail. This is just to kind of remind you. So those are the inputs. Now let's look at some of the tools and techniques. Well, if you are sending these bids out, you've got to communicate it in some way. You've got to let people know that it is available, that it is going on. And so you need to broadcast it or just advertise it in some way, whether that is through certain channels, or maybe you put it on your website, or if it's something you got to put in a certain location where, say, all of the bids are supposed to go for all of the government projects, if your project is part of a government institution. But you have to communicate it some way, because otherwise, how's anyone supposed to know they should bid on your procurement documents unless they know about it? Okay. And then also too, you can have a bidders conference where you bring everyone together, and then usually somebody in your team is going to go through the proposal line by line, or at least review it in some sort, so that everybody gets a fair shot of understanding what is it that is in this bid, and that if there are any questions, everyone hears the question at the same time. Typically, this is now done electronically. We can just set up a forum or a WebEx or some kind of system that will allow us to propose and meet and discuss. But that is a bidders conference, for example. And then another technique, well, we got to figure out how we're going to decide, right? We have to evaluate it. So, maybe having a way to say, thumbs up or thumbs down, but, some kind of technique to look at the different bids and the proposals that come in and, make our decisions therein. And then two, we're going to have to discuss these things. We're going to have to interact with things and make the decisions and work with the bidders conference and answer the questions from our suppliers and vendors. So it takes some skills. And I don't know what I'm drawing here, but let's say he's on the table and he's kind of explaining things and talking things through. But you have your skills as a project manager, but also, especially in procurement, you're using a lot of different subject matter experts, like your procurement department. If you're looking or working for a very large organization, you have trained professionals who know this stuff, or maybe they're lawyers who can go through the fine print and talk it over with your team and vendors and whatever else that's necessary for your procurement. And then sometimes you have to rely on the expertise and experiences and education of how people have done it in the past, or what needs to be done within your organization. And sometimes if your project is small and there's not much to go on, maybe that's all you really need, is to rely on the expert judgment of how things should in fact go. All right. So those are various tools and techniques called out in the 6th edition PMBOK. Let's look at the outputs. There's lots. Well, one, by the end, we should eventually pick some winner to be, this is his blue ribbon if you're curious what I'm drawing here. But yeah, there should be, some contract between you guys. So we should be selecting a seller or sellers. I'll put that in the parentheses. And then we should have some kind of I'll write contract here, but really it can be any kind of an agreement, because that agreement could be formal, informal, some kind of legal binding document, doesn't matter. And sometimes, maybe we don't find the right one and we need to change requests, or we just realize that what we were sending out is not working, or nobody was able to bid on it, or maybe that the one that came through we selected is not actually going to work, and we're going to make some changes. Now, if we have selected people, well, that means how we're going to be working with them and conducting the procurements in our plans. All of those plans need to be updated, schedules, resource plans, etc. And then all the documentation that we're using is also going to be updated. And so I'll draw that, because obviously that's going to affect the requirements documentation, the resource documents, the project schedule, all those kind of examples. And then maybe we figure out that the template we used is not really good, or just is good, and we need to make notes of it so we can also update our organizational process assets. And that is a quick review of the Conduct Procurements process in the 6th edition PMBOK from thecrowdtraining.com.